Visualization in Alias 2011 has been improved by changes to the Ambient Occlusion workflow. If I take a model like this large boat, and I want to improve the image by computing the ambient occlusion, in previous versions the process would start with me shading the model, and then when I click the Compute tool the calculation begins, which can take a long time on a large model like this. If I'm successful, I get these shadow areas calculated, and my shaded boat looks much more lifelike. But if I forgot to orient all the surface normals before I started, the shading would be wrong, and I'd have to correct that and compute the occlusion again, wasting time. So in Alias 2011, I still start with the shaded model, but choosing the Compute tool doesn't start the calculation straight away. Instead, it puts me into the Orient Normals mode to check and correct any orientation problems. Only then do I click on a new Compute button to start the calculation. So basically, the order in which I do the ambient occlusion has been improved to reduce errors and wasted time. This desk model shows why ambient occlusion can improve a shaded view. Even though I have a nice shadow here on the floor, these areas under the tabletop are just too bright. So I can use ambient occlusion here to simulate the light being occluded by the tabletop geometry. I'll start by selecting just the table, and I'll apply the ambient occlusion just to the selected objects. And I'll increase the detail to 2. And now I go directly into the surface orientation view, and I can correct the normal directions in the usual way by selecting the yellow surfaces with the left mouse button. And only when I've got those right do I hit the new Compute Occlusion button. Then I'm shown a preview of the occlusion effect on some plain white surfaces, and the uncalculated surfaces are shown in red. So if I go back to the shaded view and I toggle the occlusion on and off, you can see the subtle improvement under the tabletop. That's back on, that's off, and that's on again. So now I want to calculate the occlusion for the floor, and I'll lower the detail to 1 to speed up the calculation. Again, I go into the surface normal view, but here I can switch to viewing the current status of the ambient occlusion. And to select the floor, I can pick the uncalculated red surface, and then go back to the orientation mode to compute the occlusion. As the floor is large, it takes longer to calculate, which is why I wanted to do it separately. And now I get the preview of the shading on the white surfaces. And back in the shaded image, there's now a subtle darker area on the floor, which you can see clearly if I toggle the occlusion off and then back on again. So now we have a more reliable workflow for calculating ambient occlusion.